I think once I decided to actually make permanent changes to my body, I was dedicated to not changing my mind. I knew that there was gonna be certain things that would be irreversible, but I had sort of mentally trained myself to see that as a great thing. Like, my voice will never go back. Good, awesome, I never want it to. I'm 24 years old. I transitioned in 2015 when I was 17 years old. Was trans for 5 years, almost exactly, and then started detransitioning in May of 2020 at the age of 22. I think in middle school is when I just started to feel very awkward and not comfortable. I wanted to present masculinely all the time. When I turned 18, I learned that I could obtain testosterone through informed consent, which is basically when you go to the clinic and they kind of go through all of the possible risks. And in my experience talking to them, they kind of downplayed the risks. They really sort of focused more on the aesthetic changes that I will go through. My voice did deepen because it's really deep for a woman. That just you can't change that. Once the vocal cords thicken, they can't go back. I do feel like my face has sort of gone through some permanent masculinizing changes. I do still grow a little bit of facial hair, and I'm lucky that it's not a full beard because a lot of detransitioned women do end up having a lot of facial hair, and they have to get laser hair removal to get rid of that. There are also a lot of emotional changes. I would get really angry. I had the urge to hurt people, which I had never experienced before. 3 years into transition and about 2 years of being on testosterone, I was completely married to the idea that I would be trans till I die. And so I was like, well, I might as well have top surgery. Yeah, top surgery is a really interesting euphemism that we use to describe a double mastectomy. It's interesting to me that even people in the trans community can't call it what it objectively is. I think it's probably because people want to convince others or convince themselves that this surgery is just not a big deal, but it is an incredibly life-altering surgery. So I had a double mastectomy in 2018. I had a rash breakout throughout my whole body, and I had to have tubes connected to me that were gathering fluid and blood that was coming out of me. Once I got my drains taken out, I was very, very euphoric. It felt right at the time. I mean, I never wanted a phalloplasty. That was just always too invasive and scary for me, and I knew that people usually had endless complications with that, and I didn't want to mess with that part of my body. I changed my name legally and changed all my documents so that they had my male name, and my driver's license would say that my sex was male, even though that's just objectively just not true. That was kind of okay, I guess I'm done. I've done everything that I want to do. Aren't I supposed to feel completely at peace and one with myself now? That's what I was told I would feel. Everyone in my life was calling me he. Even my parents were starting to. My dad completely got on board with it, at least linguistically. He started calling me his son, which I always thought that was what I wanted, but when he did start doing that, I felt really guilty because I knew that I was deluding myself, and I knew that he didn't actually see me as his son. How can my father see me as his son when I'm not? He raised a girl. I just felt like everyone was lying. I felt that people were lying to me and that I was lying to them, and like that I just couldn't be who I really am. When I first started transitioning, I sort of casually knew that I wanted to have kids at some point. At 17 years old, I was thinking that like, oh, that could be when I'm 30, and 13 years might as well be 100 years. So wanting kids was a pretty huge reason why I detransitioned, because I remember in like 2019 when I was still identifying as trans, I just Googled like how much is surrogacy, and it was like $90,000, and just thinking about that on top of how expensive it is to raise a child, I felt really, really discouraged. And then I remember thinking like, I have a body that can get pregnant. I could just do that, unless what I've done to myself has made that not the case. I didn't know. I was too terrified to go to a fertility specialist and possibly have that news that you're infertile and it's your fault. That was really my worst nightmare. But I'm not. The past like 2 years of my life have been really wild. Me detransitioning kind of coincided in me meeting my now husband, and he met me when I was still identifying as trans, but over quarantine we were separated for 3 months. When we reunited, I told him that I was gonna detransition. Yeah, I mean, if you told me 2 years ago that in 2022 you would be married and pregnant, I just would not, I wouldn't believe you. I had to tell my OB that I used to be trans because I had a double mastectomy, and that's relevant to breastfeeding, like I can't do it. So she kind of was like, in terms of chest feeding, what are your plans for that? Also, what are your pronouns? Because you used to be trans. I'm like, yeah, I used to be, not anymore. So not playing that pronoun game anymore. You would call me she. I'm a woman, but it's not an identity. It's just what I am.